Hello, I'm Carmen Llama, and this is my diversity's final exam. I'm going to start talking about diversity's historical evolution. Diversity is part of the human being, which has accompanied him throughout his history, although the way of dealing with these differences has changed a lot through this. In both antiquity and the Middle Ages, only visible differences were recognized, and these were considered demonic phenomena, so the most common way to solve them was through the murder. The attitude towards difference was negative, especially in the Middle Ages, after the appearance of the Inquisition. It will not be until the 16th century when the first educational experiences began to develop, in this case with the deaf and blind, mainly because it is considered that it is easier to teach them. However, normal children continue to be marginalized and admitted to a specialized institution, where disability is treated as a disease. In the 18th century, they are reformed, which is the first step towards the special education. In the 19th century, special education was born. In the case of Spain, this century is marked by the attention to sensory disabled, saying it will not be until the 20th century when mentally disabled will be cured. It will be on the 60s when a greater prominence of special education is found, when its activities are regulated by the Ministry of Education. In the 70s and 80s in Spain, a strong questioning of segregated educational practice will begin, demanding visibility and normalization. The process of normalization began with the General Educational Law, by which special education begins to form part of some ordinary centers. Subsequently, with the LOCSE, it is extended to all centers and to all students, and finally today we are committed to an inclusive school in which quality education for all is guaranteed, equal opportunities, education in tolerance and respect, where children who present any abnormality will receive the necessary support to complete a comprehensive development. The Spanish educational system has been evolving with the different laws. This evolution has been due, among other aspects, to the way in which attention to diversity has varied. From my point of view, throughout this journey, more and more measures have been taken aiming at the full inclusion of a student with special education needs. The General Education Law first raised the need to integrate the students with special needs into the school. Although it will be in the 1978 Constitution, the first declaration of intent appears, in which respect for differences and their attention by the states are recognized. But it will be with LOCSE when the traditional conception of special education is abandoned, and comprehensive and inclusive educational policies are initiated in our country. This law advocates a school model open to diversity and flexible enough to offer the most appropriate educational response to each student. The LOCSE involves the consolidation of the principles of normalization, school integration, and individualization of teaching. The law proposes a common education with attention to diversity and with connections between the different types of teaching. In this sense, I agree with Serra that the law represents, with ARADAP, a clear advance towards the comprehensive model and inclusive school. After that, LOMCE appeared. It combines the principle of equity and quality and configures an educational system whose purpose is to develop quality education for all. In my opinion, the most novel thing about this law in relation to diversity is that it considers the diversity of students as a principle and not as a measure that corresponds to the needs of a few. After this review, I believe that the historical evolution of attention to diversity leaves us with very important lessons. First of all, that the treatment of attention to diversity is what characterized the school model that different laws propose. That the historical evolution of the laws shows that diversity is an intrinsic characteristic of the school and society, that improving education goes hand in hand with improving attention to diversity, that understanding diversity well means considering it as an enriching element, and finally, that diversity in the classroom fosters educational inclusion and also social inclusion. In this case, when I talk about diversity, I am just not referring to diversity in terms of physical or intellectual capacities, saying if something is happening in the crisis situation, it is the increase in social and economic differences. That is why I am going to start talking about the Article 6, which includes ordinary support measures. What I found most important about this point when dealing with a situation like this is what is included in the section F of the point 6. Since there are many schools that are in areas where people do not have large financial resources and therefore do not have the necessary technological means for children to follow classes remotely. That is why schools with a student in this situation should look for ways to adapt the curriculum so that everyone can continue learning. I would also like to highlight in Article 7, points 3 and 6. On the one hand, point 3 seems very important to me since despite the situation and the obstacles it is putting in the way of teachers, they cannot leave out those who need specific support, despite how difficult it is to do this work remotely. On the other hand, about the measures in point 6, the most important seems to me is that of Section F. Since, as I said before, we must ensure that all students acquire the knowledge and skills especially for this course, regardless of their abilities or their family or economic situation. That is why it is so important that a school look for ways to adapt to these students. Finally, Article 20, Sections 2 and 4, which in my opinion are the solution to the main problems that children have when continuing their studies during the confinement, since it proposes measures to compensate for inequalities among students. It is difficult to give me a mark because, after all, it is my project and I have put into it all my effort and all the desire in the world to do the best. So maybe an 8 will be a very good mark. I would say that it has been to understand how broad the concept of diversity is, and above all, how important attention to diversity is in the centers, since it allows everyone to learn equally without leaving anyone behind. Yes, of course, it is a subject that I hardly knew about, and now it seems to me one of the most important things to keep in mind as a teacher. I've learned more about the topics covered, since on certain occasions it has been necessary to expand information to clarify concepts, and I have also understood them better since the preparation of the video has required a prior reflection.